Hello and welcome to the CDAO Magazine interview series. I'm Jeff Strane with SHI International, and we are partnering with CDAO Magazine, MIT CDIQ, and the International Society of Chief Data Officers in a series of interviews. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Besa Bauta, Chief Data and Analytics Officer at the Office of Data and System Improvement for the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. Hello, Besa.
Hi, Jeff. How are you today?
Great. So I've read a lot about talent-centered data and analytics strategies. What does that mean to you?
Obviously, the talent gap is an issue. So what do we do? I mean, we could sit and cry about it and say, oh, woo us that we don't have enough folks to kind of, help us. And I actually had this conversation a while back with a colleague of mine, and I'm thinking, yes, and I hate that adage out of the box, but what else can we do creatively?
Mhm.
So, creating mentoring programs or even reskilling my current employees, because that's going to be important for them. So I was thinking of like the 1950s, right after the war, where individuals, like the GI Bill, where
Right.
it helped a lot of the folks go back to school and college, kids coming from the war, say kids, but young men or women coming back from the war, and give them the skills and expertise to be able to achieve what is the future going to look like for them? So that helped open a lot of opportunities because it changed the paradigm for those folks. And then that made college sort of an education a really important value moving forward. So how do we do that for our current staff? And how do we support even younger generations that we're becoming digital natives? I mean, they are digital natives, but in a lot of ways, I think we're so reliant on our technology that we're augmenting our lives with these, technologies. So how do we maintain that? And what types of skills and expertise? A lot of, going forward, we have low code, no code options. So in the back, I think the technology has moved so forward that even the coding in the past, I remember with C++, it was, or Python, and many, now it's easier than in the past when I was coding with Fortran. I'm not, that sort of dates me. But that there's different types of ways of doing things. There's different tools that are available now that weren't available in the past to kind of fill that void. Is just finding those individuals that have the technology skills to be able, and also the people skills. I think, I think the people skills will need to be taught more than the technology skills moving forward. I think I see that sometimes the communication becomes much more important than the technology tools. I could always, folks can pick that up.
And I completely agree. The lifelong learning is a paradigm that I think needs to be incorporated in everything. So kind of thinking, maybe looking forward, so we don't know what kinds of new data we will see in the future, but how can you scenario plan now? Or do you have an ability to kind of take your experience and cast it into a new environment?
Jeff, I wish I had a crystal ball. I mean, who knew that we're going to have biometric data, different types of data that we've never, thought of collecting in the past, or machine data. Now we have different types of data that we didn't even think it was possible. I think it's going to be greater acceleration of, IoT, different types of device data that hasn't really been incorporated into the decision making. I think even in my field, a lot of the information that gets used is the information that our frontline staff collect, and that could be under our mental health professionals or our physicians, but we really don't collect or we don't utilize additional data that might be out there, either sensor data, movement data, geolocation data the same way. We've started incorporating a lot of that and kind of mixing the data and seeing, can we have better insight with these different types of approaches? As I said, it's really hard to determine what it's going to look like in the future, what our, world will look like as it's evolving. But my assumption would be that it's going to be more machine type of data, external environmental data that we're going to be collecting from sensors, other types of devices. The challenge will always be, how do you incorporate that? And not all data is the same data. It has different value. Just because you have it, I always tell my staff, there's the golden data and then there's the not golden data, so it really depends. Is it usable information, it's as usable as it's important to you to address a problem, and different types of data points and information can address different problems. So it also depends on the settings and the scenario as well, what information will be used and the type of information that will need to be collected.
And analytics is the integration of analytics is a journey. How do you consistently use that in the business, either from a funding perspective or in just the operation of the business decision making?
So analytics can be from descriptive, and a lot of the organizations do a lot of descriptive rather than prescriptive or prescriptive, analytics, where you have the artificial intelligence technologies. A lot of them are looking retrospectively, what really happened? Why did it happen? How come it happened? Not many of our systems are very mindful of, it's happening now, and sort of having a crystal ball. What will happen in the future? I think those are the questions that you're asking.
Mm-hmm.
I think our tools are becoming much more sophisticated, where we create different types of scenarios that can project. I was just thinking similar to like war games, if scenario A looks like this, based on this input variables, what would the outcome look like? It's not going to be 100%. There's going to be an error rate. Obviously, with every variable changing, the outcome will change. But we're becoming much more sophisticated, I think, even with our analytics tools, to kind of answer business decisions and, answer them in a way of not looking retrospectively, but prospectively. If this happens, what would it look like? If the pandemic hits, do I need to buy toilet paper? Things like that, where, I didn't see that. So, in a lot of ways, if I had those tools, maybe I would have been better equipped to kind of ride it along. And I see that's where the future is going, with different types of technologies becoming much more commonplace in our lives. Our Alexas, our Siris are, telling us what the weather it is, and they're becoming much more adept at, voice recognition. So we're going to see much more of that instead of just touching. I think our technologies are very tactile. So now when I look at a lot of the old Star Trek movies, they just talk to the system and the system responds. And it's kind of interesting that I was thinking about this yesterday when I was watching that movie. I'm like, I'm kind of living in that world as it's unfolding in a lot of ways. I am talking to my phone, like 50
And
years
it's
ago,
answering you.
and it's answering me, and people would think that I'm crazy. You cannot differentiate anymore because everyone has those, earphones. Are they talking to themselves, or they're talking to their phone? Are they talking to an AI system? I was just thinking of like the Google a Lambda. It's a language narration application. My daughter was having a long conversation, and she's like, "Mom, it's becoming much more sophisticated as we're feeding the beast or feeding the machine in a lot of ways." I think the technology, as you asked in the past, is going to move more to different types of interaction. So what would that look like as far as data collection? What would it look like as far as analytics? Is definitely an interesting future, in the next few decades.
So I have one last question for you. So what is you see as your biggest data challenges for the next 12 months or even 18 months?
So everywhere I go, it really depends on the technical debt and, the way organizational structures. Some are, in a different maturity scale. So for me, it's sort of getting back to the basics, the foundational components. Where is your information and what bucket? How can we standardize it? So a lot of the work, that I do is really not glamorous or sexy or interesting. It's really getting down to the basics of scrubbing. Data scrubbing, data collection, data matching, just those, foundational components that sometimes always get overlooked. Or in a lot of organizations, it really is sort of like an afterthought. They're like, well, we have all of this. And I'm like, well, that's fantastic. But have you really looked at the value of what you have? I could have a pot of gold, or I could have a pot of coal. Different value. Depending on your market and what you do with it is very different. So that's going to be really important, going forward. Even for me and others to really, when they come into an organization or division, to do sort of that, needs analysis and determine the maturity model, because that's going to help you determine where you need to start at. And for me, it's sort of, starting at the basics.
incredible. Thank you very much. I want to thank you, Besa, for joining me today, and please visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jeff. It was a pleasure talking to you.